Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. We're going to hear more evidence today from those who were in the cordon on the night of the fire.
We are, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman, yes. We're going to start with a witness from the TMO whom Mr. Dermot Keating in my team is going to call. Before he does, can I just explain for everybody's benefit something about timetabling? We had originally on the schedule 3 control room officers who were going to come later today. But because of the way in which yesterday went and the time constraints on us in order to obtain the evidence from those witnesses you heard yesterday, we weren't able to reach the evidence of Teresa Brown yesterday, so we're going to hear her this morning. That has led to a knock-on effect, so that we will have to reschedule those 3 control room officers for a date to be fixed but as soon as we possibly can, and we are in active liaison with the London Fire Brigade at the moment about that refixing, and I'm very grateful to them for being so accommodating.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I'm afraid these things happen from time to time. We just have to make the best of it.
Yes, we will. There it is. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Keating.
Mr. Chairman, can I call Graham Webb, please?
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Webb. Would you like to sit down and make yourself comfortable?
Thank you.
Good morning. Could you give the inquiry your full name, please?
Yes, it's Graham Nicholas Webb.
Firstly, Mr. Webb, thank you so much for attending today and accommodating us. I know you've had difficulties regarding availability and you've changed those arrangements to attend today, so we're very grateful. A few words by way of introduction. If it assists you, the questions are focused on the night of the fire, the 14th of June, up until approximately 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to ask you too many questions beyond that time period because we're entering into aftermath now. Those are questions for a different time in phase 2. In relation to questions I asked, they're designed to be simple. If I fail in that task, do ask me to rephrase them. I'm happily do so. And lastly, of course, that we're going to be revisiting events on the nights. I know you arrived probably around 6:30 in the morning, but at any stage, if you find matters upsetting or you wish to have a break, please just ask. There's no difficulty at all.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
In front of you is a blue bundle, but also on the screen, I just want to turn to your statement. You've provided a 2-page statement dated the 22nd of August 2018. If we could turn to the second page, please. And the reference is there, that's TMO 100489663. Could we turn to the second page, please? And if we can blow that up. Have you had the opportunity to read that statement recently?
Yes, I have.
And can you confirm that it's true to the best of your knowledge and recollection?
I can, yes.
And that's your signature, which is there on the bottom of page 2.
It is, yes.
Thank you.
Good.
Lastly, by way of introduction, your evidence it's not going to be too long. It's going to fall into 3 broad areas. Firstly, background and experience. Then we're going to turn to your notification in relation to the fire and subsequent attendance at the tower. And then lastly, your actions within the cordon that night. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay, so our first heading is your background and experience. Again, I'm going to deal with it briefly if I may. But turning back to June 2017, you were Managing Director of Repairs Direct Limited. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And that was from January 2016 to November 2017.
That's correct.
If we go back to your statement, page 1, that's set out at paragraph 1 to 2. And you indicate at page 1 of your statement, we'll just turn to that now in a moment. Mr. Documents Director, could we go back to page 1, please, if we can? You indicate that at the time that Repairs Direct Limited was a wholly owned subsidiary of the TMO, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And Repairs Direct Limited, by virtue of his name, perhaps unsurprisingly, was responsible for repairs in the TMO managed housing, is that correct?
Yes, it was responsible for repairs inside the homes primarily, so people who have had a leak perhaps, or needed cupboards repaired or doors replaced, those sort of things. It's very much aimed at repairs inside their homes.
And prior to January 2016, had you any working relationship with Kensington and Chelsea TMO?
Yes, in 2009-10 I worked for an organisation called Morrison Facility Services, and at that time they were the primary contractor for repairs in the homes of the council-owned properties in the Royal Borough, Kensington and Chelsea. It was after that contract ended that the TMO set up their own subsidiary to do so.
So experience with the TMO going back to 2010 and involved from January 2016 with
Yes.
Repairs Direct Limited.
Absolutely, yes.
And in relation to Grenfell Tower, were you familiar with Grenfell Tower through your role with Repairs Direct Limited?
I was familiar with it in the same way that I was familiar with the other blocks in the council's property portfolio, yes.
But any direct knowledge of attending Grenfell Tower?
I don't think I actually visited it myself direct. I went out with my staff frequently to accompany them on visits just to keep familiar with how things were going. I don't recall visiting any homes inside Grenfell Tower as part of that, though.
Could I just turn, please, to the TMO emergency plan, which we saw yesterday?
Yes.
It's TMO 100-13898, and that'll come up on the screen in front of you. Whilst that's been brought up, I just want to ask you, in relation to that document, which we'll see in a moment, were you aware prior to the 14th of June 2017 of the TMO emergency plan?
Yes.
We're just waiting for that document to come up. If we can turn to page 3, please, and we see that the document is, the most recent edition appears to be 2016.
Mm-hmm.
The document sets out that a number of call-outs in relation to during office hours. Were you part of the cascade during office hours?
During office hours, yes.
And outside office hours, were you part of the cascade?
I was not part of the formal cascade in the plan, no.
I wonder if you could turn to page 17, just as an illustration, please, of the normal working hours cascade, briefly. We'll see the customer service centre. Information is received at the top of that page, and we see at the left-hand side your details.
Yes.
And in the centre, Teresa Brown. On the right, Peter Madison.
Yes.
And then it seems to be working down. So you would appear to be quite high up on that sort of tier of notification.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yes.
There's reference in the document, I may not need to turn to it, of the executive team in a TMO. Were you part of that executive team?
No, I wasn't.
Who would be, briefly?
So Robert Black and then the 3 executive directors, one of whom was my line manager.
And who would that be?
Sasha Jevons.
Thank you. And we can see actually Sasha Jeffens on the
Yes.
above you on that chart. And whilst working during your time at Repairs Direct Limited, did you have training in relation to the application of that emergency plan?
I recall being briefed on it fairly early in my time in the organisation. Not a formal training course, but I do recall somebody briefing me on it.
And the nature of that briefing, a discussion?
Yeah, a discussion, just walking me through the plan.
And in terms of the application of that emergency plan, were you involved in any application of that emergency plan during your time at Repairs Direct Limited?
Not as I recall, no.
For instance, were you ever in attendance at a large emergency, perhaps involving a fire?
No, I do recall there was one incident of a fire in Trellick Tower,
Yes.
which was contained within a flat. I think that was in April of 2017. It happened in the early hours of the morning, and I didn't get there until about 8:30. It was a very much a controlled incident and very much smaller than the terrible incident that we're talking about today.
So forgive me for speaking over, your attendance was sometime after
Yes.
the incident and had been controlled by then?
Yes, exactly.
Yes. And if we could turn, please, to page 23 of that plan. Are you aware, contained within that plan, and we'll see it in a moment, that there was a number of pro formas to complete in the event of emergency?
Yes, I'm aware they were part of that pack, yes.
And here we see the pro forma for recording details of actions taken with KCTMO emergencies.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a section there, responses initiated by, and then we have underneath that, responses from staff, contracts on site. We could go forward, please, to page 25 of that document. I'll try and blow it up. It says, copies of this completed pro forma must be provided on the next working day to the duty officer, head of repairs and customer services. Would that be you, or that would be somebody else?
No, that would be the customer services team was primarily the call centre, so that's not me. It would go to them in order that they could raise formal orders for any repairs to be completed as a result of the incident.
Yes. So you are aware of this documentation, aware of the pro forma? Yes. Can I move on now to the second heading, which is actually the events on the night?
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps linked to what we've just been discussing is records, if you kept any records of the night itself. Did you keep a contemporaneous record of events when you were within the cordon when you arrived that night?
No, I didn't.
Very soon after, did you make a record of your actions within the cordon that night?
No, I didn't.
Was there a reason why you didn't do that, Mr. Webb?
In hindsight, perhaps I should have done. It hadn't occurred to me at the time. I was merely trying to offer as much assistance as I could. And both on the night and in the days following, I was making sure that my team were doing everything we could to respond. So both in terms of, for example, there were lots of homes on the estate, on the broader estate, which had been forced into by the police as part of the evacuation. And my team were very busy making sure that those doors were secure so that residents could return and feel secure within their homes and that their properties were kept secure. So there was a lot of other activities going on that I was involved with.
I understand. If we could return back to your statement, please, in paragraph 4. It may be there's a little bit of lag between the documents coming up. If you have got paragraph 4 of your statement in front of you.
Yeah.
It deals with your notification. If you could try and just expand paragraph 4, so I'm very grateful. You mentioned that you had received, you'd been called several times by Teresa Brown,
Mm-hmm.
and you discovered that you had missed those calls after you received a text message from another individual.
Yes.
And on receiving that text message, you checked the news,
Yeah.
and you phoned Teresa back
Yes.
about 5:30. Is
Yes.
that sort of fair summary of how you came to know of Grenfell Tower fire?
Yes, that's fair.
When you spoke to Teresa Brown at 5:30, what did Teresa Brown say to you? Can you recall?
She explained just the scale of the incident, and obviously the terrible events that were unfolding, and how we just needed as much support that we could provide to people on the scene as we could.
And what did you understand that support to be?
Teresa mentioned, as I recall, that there were rest centres and rescue centres being set up that her staff were looking to help with. We weren't sure how the rest of the day would unfold and what support we might need, so I offered to come in and support in any way I could.
So you mentioned you offered to attend. Were you asked to attend, or was it an offer to attend?
I can't recall whether Teresa specifically asked me. It would be in my natural style to offer to come and support and help.
And during those discussions, were you aware whether the TMO emergency plan had been activated?
No, I'm not aware. I don't recall that being part of the conversation. But what was clear, and I do recall that while Teresa was talking to me, I turned the news on.
Yes.
And from the scale of the incident, it became clear that it was a much larger incident that would normally be covered by the TMO emergency plan. And my expectation would have been that the borough emergency plan would have been invoked far earlier.
And had you experience of the borough's contingency management plan?
No. I was aware of its existence, but I had no experience of it. So you mentioned that you offered to attend and offered to assist in any way.
Was there any specific role allocated to you in your discussions with Teresa Brown before you attended?
No.
Arrival at your scene. If you can turn to paragraph 5, please. Arrival at the scene, forgive me. So you arrived around 6:30, 6:45.
Something of that order, yes.
And at paragraph 7, you say that you met Miss Brown at St. Clement's Church Rest
Yes.
Centre.
Yes.
That was a sort of rendezvous point. Was that the position?
I knew it was directly opposite the estate,
Yes.
and as I think other people would have explained, it was difficult to get to the area in the morning, and I'd ended up using a bike to come from Hammersmith to the area. I called Teresa when I got to that area because she said there was a rest. She told me there was a rest centre there, and she came and found me, and we went into the rest centre initially.
It was roughly about an hour from your time speaking to Miss Brown and your attendance. Does that sound about right?
Something of that order, yeah.
And when you first saw Miss Brown at St. Clement's Church, did she give you a briefing or update of what the position was?
Yes, I mean a brief summary of the scale of the terrible events that were unfolding, and the efforts that her and her team were making in the rest centres, and that Robert Black was inside the cordon, and that we were going to go and meet with him shortly afterwards.
And did she say what Mr. Black was doing inside the cordon at that point?
I think, from memory, I think she explained that he was acting as a support for the local authority liaison officer, or LALO,
Yes.
and any request that they had from the fire brigade or the Metropolitan Police that we could help with.
You use a phrase later on in your statement, the point of contact. Did you understand from your discussions with Miss Brown that Mr. Black at that stage was the point of contact with the LALO?
That was my understanding, yes.
And were you at St. Clement's with Miss Brown for a long period of time, or was it a short period of time?
It was a short period of time.
And very soon after this discussion, you made your way over to the command centre, is that correct?
Yes,
Command
Teresa
units.
Brown and I made our way over to the command centre and met with Robert Black.
At the time you arrive at the command unit, and you say you mentioned you met with Robert Black, was there anybody else from the TMO present around the command unit at that point?
Not that I recall.
And did you receive a briefing or an update from Mr. Black at that point, meeting him at the command unit?
I think he added a little bit further to the briefing that Teresa had already given me. He introduced me to the local authority liaison officer, and he was talking about having to leave site fairly soon to attend a Gold Command meeting, I believe, at the town hall. And we established that Teresa would focus on supporting staff from the rest centres, and I would take over from where Robert had stood, supporting any requests from the local authority liaison officer.
Well, you mentioned he added a little to the briefing. Is there any more detail that you can recall now in relation to what Mr. Black said?
No, not specifically. I mean, obviously, you could see the scale of the events
Yes.
and the terrible tragedy that was unfolding, and you could understand the impact. It didn't need to be articulated.
You mentioned there was a division of roles, one given to you and one given to Miss Brown. Who made that decision?
I mean, between us, it was a fairly natural sense of order. Teresa Brown's team were the people who supported people in the community generally, so they were the best place to be in the rest centres, and Teresa was best placed to support those. With the background in operational roles, I could support
Yes.
what the local authority liaison officer needed, so we talked about it between us. It was a very simple conversation.
So at this point, you'd arrived around 6:30, 6:45. There was a short period of time between you being at St. Clement's and arriving at the command unit,
Yes.
probably closer to 10 to 7, 7 o'clock at latest. Is that a fair?
Probably 7 o'clock, 10 past 7, something of that order, yes.
And when you were speaking to Teresa Brown and speaking to Mr. Black around the command unit and having this discussion about division of roles, and having a briefing in general terms. Was there any mention of any outstanding requests being made to TMO?
Not that I recall, no.
At that point, your arrival just after 7, anything specifically regarding building plans at that point?
I know that during the time I was there, certainly during the morning, I took in the morning in its overall sense, there were requests for building plans, asbestos registers, and also lists of names. When I was there, it was more of what names had our teams identified in the rest centres that could be crossed off of a list of people who lived in the block,
Yes.
in the tower itself.
I'll return back to that in a moment, if I may. Mr. Black, can you recollect the time he left to go to the goal meeting at the town hall?
I don't recall the exact time. Certainly, we were there together for a period of time, and then
Yes.
he left to go to the gold meeting. But I couldn't recall the exact time.
We heard evidence that it was around 9 o'clock when he left, perhaps a little bit before then, but around 9 o'clock. Does that sound about right?
It's possible.
So we've got a position where you've arrived at the command unit a little bit after 7, and he leaves perhaps a little bit before 9 o'clock or 9 o'clock. So a period of perhaps a maximum of 2 hours together. Does that sound fair?
Maximum, yeah. If my recollection would be shorter than that, but it was a maximum of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And during that time, you were together at the command unit. Can you assist us with what you were doing?
So, having been introduced to the local authority liaison officer and established there were no immediate requests, I was doing a number of things. I was talking to my team to make sure that my background in operations has taught me that it's always about the incident you're managing at the time, but it's also about what comes after. So I was making sure that I had tradesmen available to help with anything we might need. So boarding up, providing additional materials, or anything that might result from that. To make it so there's time really on the phone to talk to people about that, and to make sure that my team were briefed on what was going on and how to deal with the rest of their day.
So you're making some calls.
Yes.
And just to picture it in terms of Mr. Black, he probably was very close beside you. Is that
Yes.
a fair description? And during your time when you were together for this maximum period of 2 hours, did you observe Mr. Black having any direct conversations with anybody from the London Fire Brigade?
I can't recall. I know the local authority liaison officer spoke to us frequently. I can't specifically recall Mr. Black talking to anyone from the fire brigade directly at that point.
So during this period of time, the LALO, if I could use that phrase, was speaking with you frequently, you as in the collective you and Mr. Black?
Yeah.
And what was the LALO saying?
Again, it was updates on the events that were unfolding. As I say, I know that during the morning there were requests from the LALO for information, but I can't recall if they were before 8:30 or later. But during the morning, there were requests for information from the LALO.
And just trying to just revisit that for a moment and doing the best you can. There was requests for information. Can you recall whether there was requests for information when Mr. Black was with you before 9 o'clock?
I know he had been requesting information before I got there. I can't recall specifically if he was asked for information while we were there together.
You say, I know he'd been requesting information before I got there. What do you mean by that? So that's Mr. Black requesting information?
I know that people had asked for information before I met him, because he, in his explanation of the role that he'd been performing, he said that they've been asking him for information such as lists of tenants and residents. So
you're referring to the LALO said that they'd been asking for information already?
Yes, and Robert Black explained to me that the LALO had been asking for that information.
So, okay. And can you assist us with what information, when Robert Black was explaining to you that the LALO had been asking for information, what information did he mention that they were looking for?
The one that sticks in mind is the list of known residents.
List of known residents.
Yes.
And in relation to plans, we know there's a reference later on in your statement to plans, but did Mr. Black mention anything in relation to plans at that stage?
I'm sorry, I can't recall specifically. I don't recall that he did.
We know that you take over as point of contact after Mr. Black leaves. Did he, at that point of departure, do any sort of handover with you, saying this is how matters are, these are the things which are still outstanding?
No, what I recall.
And you mentioned, if you could turn to your statement at paragraph 9, please. So you remained at the control unit to offer whatever assistance I could, and I took over from Robert as the TMO point of contact when he left about 9 a.m. If you could turn over leaf, please. To a gold command meeting, the top of page 2. Throughout, I liaised verbally with LFB officers, the RBKC, LALO on site, and I spent most of my time on telephone calls to TMO staff to liaise and give briefings and to seek request information, as well as a plan going forward. And then you conclude, I helped LFB with the information they wanted, ensuring that RBKC were also aware of the information from site.
Mm-hmm.
So was the position this, is that you were in direct contact with the LALO?
Yes.
And were you in direct contact with the LFB officers there as well?
No, they wouldn't ask me directly. It tended to be that they would ask the LALO, and sometimes the LALO would call me over to join that conversation if it was information that they were looking for from the TMO.
Mm-hmm. So the picture was contact with LALO first, yes, and it may be that you were party to a three-way conversation, yes, with a LALO,
yes,
fire officer and you.
Yeah, on the curbside, I never went into the command unit at all.
If we can now move on, please, to paragraph 11, please. You say, during the time I was at the command unit and after 8 a.m. I was asked by the LFB about structure plans, flat layouts, floor plans, names, a number of residents and an asbestos registers. And I answered questions verbally where I was able to, otherwise I contacted others, mostly in the asset team, to provide information, which was mostly sent by email to an address they gave.
Yes.
In terms, you may have touched upon this already, but who made these requests for information?
So it would normally, from my recollection, the LALO would be having a conversation with a fire officer, and and either came to speak to me to ask for it or call me to join that conversation.
And it's after 8 o'clock, so there's an hour period when Mr. Black is there with you.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to assist? I may have asked this already, forgive me if I'm asking for perhaps a second or third time. Are you able to assist at this stage whether Mr. Black was with you when these requests were being made?
I can't recall.
During these requests for information via the LALO, you mentioned that it was evident from those discussions that this information had been requested before. Is that fair?
No. When I arrived, Robert said that he had been asked for lists of residents before.
Yes.
The information I was being requested for, I don't recall it being a repeated request or anybody saying we've been asking for this before. It was a request for information, and I went and tried to make sure we provided it as quickly as we could.
You mentioned that you were trying to get information from others.
Yes.
You mentioned the assets team.
Yes.
What's the assets team?
So the assets and regeneration team was headed by Peter Madison.
Yes.
They held all the structural plans for the building and could tap into the asset register and provide copies across email for the fire brigade to be able to examine.
So in terms of where this information would be stored, you mentioned that team would have the information.
Yes.
Electronically.
Yes.
And how difficult would you anticipate getting that information to be, normally?
As long as somebody can log in, and if they're either in the office or they can log in from home, they can access the data and then attach the files to an email and send that across.
And in relation to those requests for information which are set out at paragraph 11,
yes,
you mentioned, moving on to paragraph 12, that you liaised with the assets team and Teresa Brown, who was able to access the list of tenants and leaseholders, and she had a team of people who supported her.
Yes.
Do you know whether that information was obtained in terms of list of residents as one heading or plans?
In most cases, the residence lists that I was referring to, as I say, were corresponding the known list of residents to the list of people that her team had already accounted for in the rest centres. And I know that Teresa and I liaised heavily throughout. She came through the court and talked to me. We talked on the phone a lot. Her team photocopied those lists and handed them through to the fire service. Other information I know was emailed direct. What I was keen to do in the request I got was not be a choke point and provide that information. So I would give them the LFB email address direct to send it to, not rely on it coming to me for me to forward.
Okay. Which was my next question. As the point of contact, did you have any involvement in relaying that information? But your answer is, well, you actually didn't want to. Your rationale was not to choke information. You were giving people information that they could email directly.
Yeah, exactly. I'm also familiar that sometimes during those sort of significant events, mobile networks become very congested. And I didn't, again, want the delay to be the information hitting my handheld to be able to delay getting reaching to the fire service.
Is it fair to say that one downside of that approach is that you may not be informed as to what information has arrived with the LFB, whether those requests have been satisfied?
Possibly.
Was that information going to be sent by email or in some other form?
Most cases it was sent by email. The only case that I recall being different was the list of names from the rest centres, because it was handwritten. So they were photocopying pieces of documents and physically bringing them through the cordon to hand in.
Thank you.
And in relation to the email traffic, do you know whether you were copied in to that email traffic?
I don't recall. I think my recollection was that I was copied into some of it, but not all of it. But my instruction to them was to send it direct to the fire service.
You mentioned in your statements that you were at the command unit as a point of contact for about 15 hours. In fact, you left the location at around 21:45.
Yes.
That night. Is that correct?
It is.
So you were there for a significant period of time beyond the 8 o'clock in the morning we discussed as a sort of parameter earlier on. So I'm not going to ask you any questions in relation to those events after that period of time. Mr. Chairman, I've come to the end of the questions I wish to ask, but it may be that we have a brief break.
Well, I think it would be sensible to give you a chance just to check, wouldn't it?
Thank you.
Mr. Webb, once Council's got to the end of his questions, or thinks he has, we normally have 5 minutes just to allow him to check that there aren't any more questions. So we'll break now for 5 minutes. I'm going to ask you to go with the usher. Please don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room. Right. And we'll get you back in, I hope, at 22:11. Thank you very much. Right, 22:11, please. Yes, Mr. Keating, one or two questions?
Yes, three in fact.
Three. All right, thank you. Yes, Mr. Webb, a few more questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Not too many, but I'm very grateful for your patience. In relation to, there's three topics. First topic is training. We touched upon it before about training in relation to the emergency plan. Can you assist us whether you had regular training in relation to the emergency plan?
Not regular formal training, no. I was briefed on it not long after I joined the organisation. I was aware that I had a role in the plan during normal working hours. But as I said, I was briefed on it as part of the conversation rather than a formal training.
No. And that really is the summary of your experience in relation to training. It was a briefing at the outset and no further follow-up in relation to that.
In terms of the emergency plan, yes.
Yes.
I understood my role, understood where I sat in the plan.
Thank you. Second topic is in relation to plans. You mentioned towards the last part of your evidence, Peter Madison had all the structural plans at the asset team and could tap into the asset register. In relation to that, was this database called a Keystone database?
Yes.
And did it contain also an asbestos register?
The asbestos register, yes, I believe it did sit on Keystone as well, and that interfaced into a number of different systems. But yes, it primarily sat on Keystone.
And was there any other key information that you thought would be on the Keystone database in relation to the building?
Not that I can recall specifically.
Last topic, please, is this. Were you aware, as at the night of the fire, of any deficiencies in the building as concerns fire safety?
No.
Did you, probably not in light of your answer, but did you or anyone else to your knowledge in a TMO share any concerns regarding the building with the LFB within the cordon that night?
No.
Mr. Webb, that brings to the end the questions I have. And can I thank you again for attending today?
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for coming, Mr. Webb. I'm sorry we've disrupted some of your arrangements, but I hope not too much.
No, you haven't.
Anyway, it's been very helpful to hear your evidence. It's all part of filling in the jigsaw, if you can put it that way.
I
So
understand.
we're grateful to you for coming along to help us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now you're free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before we move on to the next witness,
Let's
forgive
just
me.
let Mr. Webb go. Yes, I'm sorry. Mr.
No, not at all. And before we move on to the next witness, we may wish to have a short break so we can arrange ourselves.
Yes.
That's okay.
Give me a hint. Do you mean a 10-minute break?
I look to Mr. Millett, who guides me in all these things.
Perhaps 10, I need to make sure the witness is ready.
Yeah, yes. Could we have 10 minutes, perhaps?
Right. Well, then I'm going to say 11 o'clock
Thank you.
because it's very difficult to work to the odd minutes here and there.
Yes.
So we'll have a break now.
Thank you.
Resume at 11 o'clock, please. Thank you. Yes, just a minute.
Mr. Chairman, good morning. I now call Teresa Brown of the TMO.
Thank you.
Just repeat after me.
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
that
the evidence I shall give
the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Good. Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. Can I just say that we can take this as slowly as you feel comfortable,
Thank you.
and if there are any stages at which you would like a break, just signal that and you can have one.
Thank you.
All right? Yes, Mr. Miller.
Ms. Brown, can I start by asking you please to give the chairman your full name?
Yeah, my name's Teresa Ann Brown.
And I should just say thank you, first of all, for coming to the inquiry and assisting us with our investigations. We are extremely grateful. As you've just heard the chairman say, if you need a break at any stage, then all you have to do is say and we can take a break. I will aim to sit or ask you questions for no more than an hour, but if you think that's too long, you need a break, we can take a short break.
Thank you.
I'm going to focus on the events on the night within the cordon at Grenfell Tower. There are other areas in which there are questions, but which we will cover at a later stage of this inquiry. My questions are intended to be short and simple. Sometimes they don't work out that way. So if you want me to repeat a question or put it in a different way, I can do that very easily.
Okay, thank you.
Now, can I start by putting to you your witness statement? You've provided one witness statement to the inquiry, and that is at TMO 100 48960.
Yes.
Is that the first page of that statement?
Yes, that's correct.
Could you please go to page 3?
Yes.
And on that page, we'll just wait for it to come up on the screen. I should just say it's
Oh.
easy to look at the monitor on the desk. Some people find it easier to use that than the document in the file, but
It's not changing,
it's
is
not.
it?
If we could have page 3 of that, please.
There we are.
There we go.
Now, that you'll see a signature there under a statement of truth
Yes.
over a date of the 21st of August 2018. Is that your signature?
Yes, that's correct.
And have you had an opportunity to read this statement recently?
Yes, I have.
And can you confirm that its contents are true?
Yes.
Thank you. And there are no exhibits to this statement, I think. Now, I'm going to turn first to your career and your position. As at June 2017, Ms. Brown, you were, I think, the Director of Housing for Kensington and Chelsea Tenant Management Organisation, or
Yeah.
the TMO, as we call it.
That's correct, yes.
And were you part of what is termed the TMO executive team?
No, I wasn't.
You were not. Were you part of the team that would ordinarily be called out to a major event or incident?
I wasn't on the out-of-hours emergency rota. I was on the working hours rota.
Right. And within the TMO, what was your job title?
I was Director of Housing, and I managed neighbourhood housing services, the customer call centre and the estate services team, cleaning grounds maintenance contracts.
Yes, and at paragraph 2 of your statement, if we could just have that up, it's on page 1 of the statement. Paragraph 2, if we could please have that expanded. You say you were responsible for the things you've just referred to just now. Did you have the most senior responsibility for those things?
Yes, that's
You did.
correct. Reporting in, obviously, to my line manager.
And who was that?
That's Sasha Jevons,
Sasha Jevons. And who did Sasha Jevons report to?
and to Robert Black.
Directly?
Yes.
Right. Now, you were a member of the executive team, I think.
No, I wasn't. a member
You
of the executive team.
were in the role of, well, let me ask you this. When did you start as Director of Housing?
February 2014.
And you held that role until when?
Until I left in June 2018.
Right. And I think at that stage, did you transfer to RBKC?
I had transferred to RBKC in the March, and then I left the June after.
So there was a period of
3
an
months.
overlap.
Yeah.
I follow. And are you still, as at now, working for RBKC?
No, I'm not working currently.
Right. Now, in your capacity as Director of Housing, with the responsibilities that you've identified at paragraph 2 of your statement, were you familiar with Grenfell Tower?
I'd been in it a few times. I didn't go on a daily basis. That wouldn't have been my role, but I had, yes, I had knowledge of it.
You had knowledge of it. Were you familiar with the layout of the building?
Yes, I'd been in it since refurbishment. I knew the current layout, yeah.
Were you familiar with the refurbishment?
In terms of I knew how the building had changed, yes. Yeah.
Yes, okay. Did you ever have any training in what is called the London Resilience Partnership Strategic Coordination Protocol?
No, I didn't, because that was a council-run training. We weren't part of that.
Were you familiar with, or did you ever receive any training in the LESLP Major Incident Procedure Manual?
No.
We'll come to the TMO emergency plan shortly.
Yeah.
Turning to the night of the fire itself, Miss Brown, you indicate in your statement at paragraph 4 that you can't be certain about all the details and the timings there. And that is, or was, you say, the case when you signed your statement in August. Since August, have you seen any documents or records which would cause you to be more certain about the timings?
No, I think in preparing my statement, I had made previous notes shortly after the incident, so I had looked at my phone records and emails in doing my notes after the incident,
Right.
so I would have referred to those.
Okay. Did you keep any contemporaneous written record of events or of your actions on the night? When I say contemporaneous, I mean as you were going along.
No, definitely I didn't do that on the night, apart from the information that myself and my team collated in terms of the register of residents and those who were safe and missing. That would have been the most comprehensive notes that I would have been responsible for that evening.
We'll come back to that. Just in light of your last answer, though, if I understood it correctly, can I just show you a document at TMO TMO 0084032. That's 0084032. So I'll repeat it again. TMO 0084032. Now, thank you. Now, Ms. Brown, can you tell us what this document is? Okay,
so this is one of many notes like this. So after I arrived on site, I mobilised my teams to the rest centres and I asked them to collect records of anyone who'd been in the building, the address, the name, household information, and if people were safe or missing, and they recorded that, my teams recorded that throughout the rest centres, and this is an extract of that. And the purpose of this was for me to provide this information directly to the fire brigades to help them in identified people.
Right. So is this an example of contemporaneous records you did make on the night?
Well, I personally didn't make these, so this would be my team in the rest
I see.
centre. So, yes, it's not my writing.
It's not. I was going to ask you. That's not your handwriting. Do you know who it is? Do you know whose it is?
No, because I had many staff in the rest centres on the evening, so this would be one of them. There were several people, compiling examples of this.
Right. Did those members of staff in the rest centres hand documents like this to you?
So how I organised it was that there was a manager in each of the rest centres, and they would collect the information from the staff members there, and then arrange for that to be brought to me. I was at St Clement's so that I could pass it on. So they weren't doing it individually. It was coming through me.
So you were
coordinating that, yeah, conduit for it, yeah.
Yes, I see. Okay, and then and would you collate them in some way?
So initially they were, I gave them by hand to the LFB. So I literally went to the command unit, and I was taken to, not the main command unit, but there was another command unit on Grenfell Road, and I was taken there to hand these in physically in the early hours. But what I did do was make a call. I mean, obviously there weren't many of us on site originally, and I wanted to get going with this, so we did it in a handwritten form. But I did make a call to one of my heads of service who was still at home and say, please make sure you bring in a laptop. We need to get this information onto a spreadsheet and tally it with the tenancy information we already had on who was in which tenant was in each property.
Right. Now, if I was to ask you any detailed questions about these particular names and flats on this piece of paper, would you be able to help me with the details?
To what extent?
Well, let's try. The first one, at the top on the left-hand side, is missing concern. Steve Power, 12th or 13th floor, and someone's written recorded next to it.
Yes.
Do you remember seeing this note with that name on it?
I don't remember this specific one.
No. And there are others.
So sorry, can I just say, not all of these would have been handed into the LFB in the early hours. So some of these would have come during the day. It was obviously a very long day. So and they would have been put onto the spreadsheet and cross-reference with that. So if there was something that I can see isn't clear, if it's 12th or 13th floor, we would have been able to cross-reference that and find the actual data.
Okay. Now, as I understand from your answer, this is not your contemporaneous note of what was happening in the rest centres, and you've told us what these are. Is there a reason why you didn't keep any substantive contemporaneous record of what was happening?
I just didn't have the opportunity to do that. So my role on the day initially was to go to St Clement's Rest Centre with my colleague Nicola Bartholomew. And what we were both doing was literally going around everybody in that rest centre, checking that they were okay, if there was anything we could do to support them, getting their name, their address, finding out if all their household was safe, and recording that. So that was my main priority initially, as well as trying to get staff in, speaking to Graham. I was on the phone to so many people during the course of the night. There wasn't time for me to write any additional notes. The evidence was, in.
Did you make any note or log of the events after the event?
I did, because I knew it was going to be important that I could recall as many facts as I could from the evening. So as I said previously, in the next couple of weeks, I did make some more detailed notes of what I'd been doing, what my teams have been doing, and that was backed up by by emails and phone records that I'd looked at the time.
And do you know what happened to those notes?
Well, I utilised, they were kind of my personal notes, and I utilised them to write my statement.
Oh, did you? Right. Okay. Well, we'll have to follow that up with somebody else then.
Well, before we leave it, did you keep your personal notes?
I have them on email. I had them on email. Obviously now I've left the
Yeah,
organisation. I
that's
don't
all right.
have any access to them. But it was a Word document.
It was a Word document?
I just kept a tally of. I wasn't just on the night, so that document was, covered the next few weeks and the things that we were doing over
Right.
that
All right.
time.
That's helpful. Thank you very much.
When you prepared your statement, who provided you with the notes you're referring to?
I'd kept a copy. I had kept a copy.
I see.
Personally.
Okay, you've kept a copy personally.
Yeah.
Do you still have those notes with you? Not today necessarily, but in your personal possession.
Yeah, I will have a Word document of that. Yeah.
Would you object to providing them to the inquiry?
No, not at all.
Thank you.
But as I say, it covers a
Yes.
long period of time.
Now, in paragraph 4 of your statement, Ms. Brown, if we can just look at that, please, and have that expanded. You say, it's on the screen,
Yeah.
you say, I cannot now be certain about all details and timings, but at about 2:30 a.m. on 14th of June 2017, I received a telephone call from Nicola Bartholomew, TMO's neighbourhood team leader, Latimer, to advise me of the fire at Grenfell Tower. Number of questions about that. First of all, did she tell you how she knew about the fire?
I think I can't be certain about this. I think she said that she'd got a call from one of our resident caretakers. I think that's how she'd find out. Yeah.
Was it a long conversation?
So the conversation I had with her initially, she was really distraught. So it didn't go on very long because Robert Black called me on my other phone. So I knew it was him because his name came up, and I said to Nicola, I'm going to have to call you back. So I ended the conversation with her, spoke to Robert, and then after I'd spoken to Robert, I called her back.
Did Nicola Bartholomew tell you whether she'd spoken to anybody else before she called you?
I think just the conversation with the caretaker, I think.
Do you know who that caretaker was? What the name was?
I'm sorry, I can't recall that at the moment.
Where were you? Do you remember when you received Nicola's call?
I was in bed. Unfortunately, that day I had my two phones in my bag near my bed, so I heard them.
Right. Now, you say you also received a call from Robert Black at the same time, and that's what you say in your statement.
Yeah.
And you say that he advised me that he was on his way to site, and I said that I would join him there. Similarly, were you in bed, or at least at home, when you got that call?
Sorry?
Similarly, were you in bed or at home
As
when
I've
you
just
got that call?
explained, they were simultaneous calls,
Yeah.
so yeah, I was in the same
So you were
place.
on the phone to both at the same time, were you?
No, sorry. So I was on the phone to Nicola. I could see that Robert was calling me. So as I said, I told Nicola I would have to call her back. Just had the conversation with Robert and then
Right.
called her back.
Apart from him advising you that he was on his way to site, did he tell you anything else?
He told me that there was obviously a significant fire.
Anything else?
No, I don't recall any further details. I mean, that in itself was enough to mobilise me into knowing I needed to go and do something.
And you said you would join him there. Did you volunteer that, or did he
Yes.
ask you?
Can't remember the detail of that. I think I just said, well, I'll come in. I've spoken to, Nicola's. I've spoken to Nicola as well.
Now, you've put the timing of these two calls at about 2:30 a.m. When you did your statement, were you looking at anything to remind you that it was 2:30, or is it something you just remember?
I think this is where I used my phone details to see what calls that I had.
So you think you used your phone records?
Yeah, I think I did. Yeah.
Right. Those phone records, are those still in your personal possession?
No, I don't have any information now.
Do you know who has got your phone records?
I would imagine ex-TMO employees would have. I don't know how long your mobile phone records stay for, so I don't know actually.
Let me just take a step back and clarify something. When you
Yeah.
did your witness statement in August this year, Did you have your phone records in front of you?
Yes, sorry. Yes, I did.
You
yes.
did?
So
Okay.
when I did my notes, I had my phone records, so I would have used those. Yeah.
When you did your notes, okay, you did your notes, and then I think you say you used your notes to do the statement. Is that
Yeah.
how it worked?
To help them.
But you didn't have your phone records to do the statement.
But I would already have utilised those in doing my notes.
Right.
As far as I recall, that's how I did it.
Has anybody asked you to hand over a copy of your telephone records?
No.
Okay.
Not that I recall.
Okay. And I think, as you said earlier, you don't have your telephone records now, or is that wrong?
No, I don't have access to that. So I would probably have just used my mobile and, tracked back.
Well, I was wondering, you were telling us you had 2 mobiles in your bag. Was one a work mobile and one a private one? Or?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it the case that you don't any longer have the phone records for either of those mobiles?
I will probably have the phone records. Well, I don't have the phone records for my mobile phone. I don't know if anyone can get those. I've never done that, so I don't know the answer.
What about your
to that.
personal?
Well, that's what I'm talking about. I don't know how you would get that now, 18 months on, whether your phone can register.
Right.
But,
Well, we can take that
sorry,
up
I
from
don't
somebody
know
else.
that. Yeah.
Now, can I ask you to see if you can help us with 2 documents? First of all, can I ask you please to be shown TMO 100-36956, page 1. Now, that is an email sent by Robert Black with to a group,
you.
including you. You see that?
Yeah, that's fine now. Thank you.
And although the details are lengthy, the names are not, and you're one of them. The second
Yep.
or third, I think, line of the list of recipients. Dear team, we have a major fire at Grenfell Tower. The fire brigade is on site, and you can see that there's been some mistyping there. I was told by Sharon, our board member, RBKC are aware and preparing Red Cross shelters. Hash is on Oz's way to the ground, and you have spoken to, it should be Teresa, I'm going in, Robert. Now, I just want to ask you, do you remember receiving this email?
No, not specifically. I'm aware of the email because I saw it. I have seen this email previously, but I'm not sure when I read it.
Okay. And do you know where you were when you saw it?
No, because I can't recall actually when I first saw it. I might have been in the cab on the way in. I don't know. I'm making assumptions there.
All right. And you can see that the timing of it, looking at this document, says 02/26/45. There's also another email, and I'm going to show you that as well at the same time if I can. If we can please have this email kept on the screen, Mr. Trial Director, but also on the screen have TMO 100-31176, page 10. I'll give you that again, TMO 100-31176, page 10.
Yeah, I think it'll be
Have you got-
expanded for us both. I hope so anyway.
Apparently this screen is going into a deep sleep and has now gone to a deep sleep. I don't know why. I don't know whether other people in the room can...
Yeah, I think
They can.
we should. Can you see that one right?
Right,
All right.
well, I
So
don't know what's
none of you have been cut off entirely. All right. Good.
Okay, we'll sort this out as we go.
Yeah.
Ms. Brown, can I be sure that on your monitor on your desk you've got both documents on your screen?
Yes, those
You have?
ones. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So looking at the left-hand one we've been looking at, that's the one timed at 02/26/45.
Yeah.
If I can ask you now to look at the document on the right-hand side of the page, that's a single page containing 3 emails. And I just want to focus you on the middle email on that page from Robert Black, 14th of June 2017. Same list of recipients, including you as the 3rd recipient,
Oh, thank you.
and the same text of the main message, major fire at Grenfell Tower, including the same typographical errors. It looks like the same message. But the time, if I can show you that, is at 03:27. Can you help us explain why one email is at 02:26 and the other is at 03:27?
I'm afraid that I can't. I know it's an issue that you were discussing yesterday at the inquiry. I think it's some technical thing with timing, but I really, I don't know. I'm not an expert.
No. Is it possible that in fact the email was sent to you and received by you at 3:27 and not 2:27?
I wouldn't be able to confirm that.
All right.
Can I just ask, would you pick up emails on one of your mobile phones?
I would pick them up on my work mobile phone.
On your work mobile?
Yeah.
And did it alert you when an email came in?
No, I don't. Not particularly. I don't think. But I would regularly look at my. As a matter of course, I would. But
No, I was just trying to relate the timings to what you told us about the telephone call. That was all.
I'm quite certain of my facts on the timing of the telephone call. Don't look like it was the first one, but I really can't really confirm that for you, I'm afraid.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Millett. Sorry to interrupt you.
Do you remember whether you had received an email from Robert Black before he called you?
I wouldn't have been looking at my emails. I was asleep until I had my first call, so there's no way I would have found it out that way.
I appreciate that. Do you remember, after having woken up and having spoken to him, then seeing that you had received an email from Robert Black?
I didn't look at my phone as the first thing. Look at my emails as the first thing I did. I got dressed, got ready, spoke to Nicola, mobilised myself, got in a cab. I wasn't looking at my email at that stage. I was getting into action.
Right. Well, we'll come back to your journey and arrival shortly. Before I do, can I just ask you 1 or 2 questions about the TMO emergency plan? Are you aware of the TMO's emergency plan, the most recent edition of which is February 2016?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with it?
Yes.
And its purpose, I think, is to govern TMO's role in emergencies. Is that right? And it's divided into 2 parts, Part 1 and Part 2. Part 1 deals with the details of what should happen in an emergency. And Part 2 is specific individual details for individual properties under the management of the TMO. That's right, is it?
Yes.
That's your understanding.
That's my recollection.
Can I just ask you to look at it, please? It's TMO 1001388. And I just want to ask you about a couple of pages in it. First of all, page 23. Which is a pro forma for recording details of action taken with KCTMO emergencies. Were you familiar with, or did you have knowledge of the use of this document as at the night of the fire?
I know it was part of... Oh, as at the night of the fire,
yes.
Sorry. We wouldn't have used this because this was the KCTMO emergency plan information, not the borough emergency plan, so we wouldn't have been using this. The scale of the emergency. Oh, sorry, that's not quite what you're asking me. Sorry.
I may have confused you. We've heard evidence. Well, let me start this way. First of all, we've heard evidence yesterday that the emergency plan that was utilised was the council's plan and not the TMO's plan. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely correct, yeah.
Does that mean that this emergency plan was simply not used at all?
Yes.
Does that mean that this pro forma was simply not used at all? Looking at it, do you think, or did it occur to you that actually given the work that you were doing, as you've described, it might have been useful to use a pro forma such as this to record and collate information.
As I explained to you earlier, I think my role was to really be out there doing what I could in the rest centres. There just simply wasn't time to be filling in information like this on the day. We were too busy trying to do the important things that mattered at that time.
At what point in time did you learn that the RBKC plan was in operation?
It was obvious to me as soon as I saw pictures of the horrible events unfolding. It was just too major for it to be a TMO managed incident. As soon as I arrived on site, I saw the LALO and the command unit. I've worked in previous organisations where I've been part of a team where the whole emergency planning role has, where the team has been responsible for that emergency planning role. So I was quite familiar with what that would be. So it was really obvious to me what was happening on the ground.
And you say in your last answer, it was as soon as I saw the horrible events unfolding. I wonder if we can just put a bit more precision around the timing of that. Was it after you arrived on site that you came to learn that the council's emergency plan was in operation, or was it before that?
I don't remember having a discussion with anyone about the council's emergency plan being in action before I arrived on site, but it was obvious to me from what I'd seen on social media that it was so significant that that would be the case.
Did you look at social media before you arrived?
Only as I was getting ready, my husband drew up a picture of it and I looked at that briefly before I got in the cab.
Your husband drew a picture?
Not drew a picture, he's not that clever, I'm afraid. He showed me drew up a picture on his phone.
I see. Right.
Yeah, sorry.
Right. Okay. So at that stage, was it right that you thought this was too big for the TMO's plan?
Sorry, can you just repeat that again?
Is it that at that stage that you thought this emergency is too big for the TMO's plan?
Well, that wasn't my precise first thought. My first thought was this is just so horrendous. The scale of it is so large. I don't think I was thinking emergency plan or not emergency plan. I was thinking about getting to site and doing what we could.
When you got to site, was there any, I think you touched on this a minute ago, but let's maybe clarify. When you got to site, was there, as you recall it, any discussion about whether you should instigate the TMO's emergency plan alongside or to dovetail with the council's plan?
No, that wouldn't be the purpose of it. It would be confusing to do that. It was really obvious to me that there was a LALO next to the command unit, that the council were taking control of the emergency plan, and our role was voluntary within that to assist where we could.
Right. Do you remember whether any positive decision was made not to instigate the TMO's emergency plan?
I don't think it was discussed at all.
Right. Now, can I take you back to paragraph 11 of your statement? And I should just say that we'll come back to the emergency plan later on. But at paragraph 11, you say, our role on site, if I can just wait till it comes up on the screen for you, your witness statement, paragraph 11, page 2. You see it says there, our role at site was specifically to respond to requests for information from the police, LFB, LALO, BEC and RBKC, and to coordinate matters at the rest centres. Now, in that paragraph, when you say our role, do you mean the TMO's role or do you mean your role personally?
I mean my role plus Graham's role and Robert when he was on site, and yes, that's what I mean by that.
So it included Robert Black?
Yes. So it would have been the people who'd had some presence outside the command unit, right, or myself in the rest centres as well.
Right. Do you recall what Robert Black's own particular role was? at the incident on the night?
So he was there before, he was on site for me. So he was the person outside the command unit when I arrived there. He was the person that continued to be there as I left shortly after I arrived to go to the rest centre. And he stayed there as the main point of contact with the Lalo until Graham had joined me at St Clements, and I had walked with Graham over to the command unit.
Yes. Now I'm not sure it's quite answered my question. My question was, it's okay. My question was, what was Robert Black's own particular role, to the best of your understanding, on the night? So
he was the point of contact with the Lalo during the period when he was there,
right,
on his own, and yeah, that was his role.
Okay. Did he at any stage tell you that he was going to leave all communications to and from the LFB to you?
No, not that I recall. We didn't have a conversation.
Did he tell you that he would leave all communications to and from the Lalo to you?
No.
Did he at any stage do anything or say anything to lead you to think that he was relying on you to pass all information to the LFB or the Met or Lalos?
I know it was clear that my main responsibility was to provide information on residents that we knew were safe and missing, and that was directly to the LFB. That was a major part of what I was doing.
Right.
And he knew that.
Now, did you ever receive any requests yourself personally directly from the LFB for information during the night?
I did, and I referred to that in my statement.
Yes, is that paragraph 12?
Paragraph 12, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Right, well, we'll come back to that.
And I know that I liaised with them directly around this information on who was safe and missing.
Right. So the answer is you did receive requests directly from the LFB?
Do you know, I can't recall how that started, whether they said collect this information on safe and missing. I think I just took that upon myself as I arrived to go to the rest centres and collect that, because it was obvious that that would be significantly useful. So right. There wasn't a request, I don't think, for that, but people would have been aware that that's what we were doing, and then I later liaised with them to give that information to the LFB. Is the best way I can answer that, I think.
Okay. Do you remember at what point after your arrival you first had... No, let me ask it a different way. Did you have direct contact with firefighters at the scene or incident commanders at the scene?
So they didn't come and ask me direct questions apart from at paragraph 12 and when, of my statement, and when I was directly liaising with them about these pieces of paper, when I was in the command unit handing those over, round the corner, not in the main command unit.
Now, I think part of the problem is we've got on the screen, we don't have paragraph 12, we have paragraph 11, which is blocking out paragraph 12, which I'm going to come back to. So perhaps the easiest thing is to leave that there, and I'll pick that thread up with you shortly.
Okay.
Let's go back to the chronology. Now, you say in paragraph 5, if we can just go back to that, please, page 1 of the statement. Paragraph 5.
Yep.
You say...
Excuse me.
Ms. Brown, are you all right?
Yes, sorry, I'm blowing my
Right.
nose. I'm fine, thank
Okay.
you. Yeah.
Now, paragraph 5, you say, I left my something home, we've redacted it because it's private information, shortly after to travel to site, arriving there at about 3:50, where I met Chief Executive Robert Black and Head of Housing Support Services, Chamchoun, who were standing outside the Fire Service Command Unit in front of Treadgold House. Now, first, how long did it take you to get from your home where you were first alerted to the fire to Grenfell Tower?
About 50 minutes.
About 50 minutes, right.
Possibly.
So if it was about 50 minutes and you arrived at 3:50, that obviously means you left home about 3 o'clock.
Yeah. I know that timing is correct because it's an Uber record. I know 3:50 is correct.
It's an Uber record, is it?
Yeah, I found that time because I looked up the Uber arrival time, and you can tell from that.
So let's just take this in pieces. When you did your statement and put the time of 3:50 in there, were you looking at your Uber record on your telephone?
I was actually looking at my husband's Uber record on his telephone.
Okay,
but
well,
it's
that's
accurate. Yeah,
all right.
It's accurate.
Okay, but a record in your
in
personal possession.
Yeah.
Have you provided that record to anybody?
No.
Have you been asked for it?
No.
So when you did your statement, is this right? You did it from a record that you didn't provide to anybody else? Is that right?
I wasn't asked to provide that sort of information.
As I understand it, it was actually on your husband's telephone.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So let's just see if I can understand how this worked. When you did your statement, did you ask your husband for his phone so you could look at his Uber records and check the time?
Yeah, he called the cab for me, and he had the detail of when he called and
right.
the arrival time of it,
Okay.
and that's how I know that it's accurate.
So fine. So that then means that you left home about 3 o'clock.
Yeah, roughly. Yeah.
Do you know what you were doing between receiving the call from Robert Black about 2:30 and leaving home at 3 o'clock?
Getting out of bed, getting dressed, speaking to my colleague Nicola. I had to phone her back. I had to phone her back, and then I got a cab and made my way in.
Right. In that telephone call you had with Nicola, which you just told us about, what did you discuss?
The magnitude of the events unfolding, that I was going in, that she was definitely going to come in. She was the the team leader for the area. She had specific knowledge of the area and knew the residents well, and she was determined to come in and see what she could do to help.
Right. Did you have any specific discussions, do you remember, about what you were actually going to be doing by way of collating information?
No, I think at that stage, until we got there, we had no idea about the specific tasks that we would be performing. I just think we, naturally, we just wanted to go and do what we could do to help. So,
when you arrived at 3:50, as you say, I think you say Robert Black was already there. How long do you think, or do you recall, he had been there for?
I don't know that.
Right.
I'm sorry, I just don't know that.
Did you have a discussion with him?
No. Discussion with him about what time he arrived?
When you first first arrived, did you have a discussion with him?
Yeah. Yes, we spoke to each other. I can't remember the detail of that initial conversation, but it would have been around what was happening around us, really.
When you had a discussion with him when you first arrived, did he give you any kind of impression as to how long he'd been there? Minutes or hours?
No.
Were you wearing anything yourself which would identify you as a member of TMO's staff?
Yeah, I have a TMO identity badge, and I had that on at the time. I had that on throughout the day because I used it to get in and out of the cordons. I was continually going in and out of the cordons, so I used that, wore it in the rest centres, had it on all day.
Right. Did you have that on as soon as you arrived? Or did you put it on after you arrived?
I think I put it on as I was on my way, and I definitely used it straight away to get through the cordons to get to the command unit when I arrived.
Now, in paragraph 6 of your statement, you say that shortly after your arrival, you say 3 team leaders.
Yeah.
We've just had that expanded, paragraph 6. 3 team leaders briefly joined us and were dispersed to the rest centres soon after their arrival. Then you identify who they were. I think it's right that, is it that Chamchoun went with 2 of the team leaders to the rest centres?
So what happened here is I had 3 of my team leaders and Hash, and we were aware of the rest centres that were open, and I divided staff amongst those. So I believe Angelique and Hash went together to Latimer. Mandy went to Rugby Portillo, and I went with Nicola I definitely went with Nicola to St Clement's.
Right. Who told you that these premises were available as rest centres?
Hash told me that information initially, and there was another rest centre, Blue Shoes, that was open initially at that stage.
On Shepherd's Bush Green?
Yeah. So I organised for a member of my team to go there as well, but when she got there it wasn't really being utilised, so she moved to another rest centre.
Did you talk to the Lalo at that early stage, initially when you arrived, about where the rest centres were?
I can't remember the exact sequence of events, but I think Hash told me that information. Now, I don't know whether he got it from the Lalo. We were all standing in a very short space, so I can't recall exactly, but I knew that information was given to me by Hash.
And was it you who had overall responsibility for allocating TMO staff to particular tasks?
Yes.
Okay. Now, going on to paragraph 7 of your statement, you say, if we can just have that expanded, you say, I spent most of my time throughout the day either at the command unit or the nearby St Clement's Church Rest Centre coordinating matters. I know it's difficult to be precise about these things, but what percentage of time do you think you spent at the command unit?
Minimal amount of time. I
Right.
should have perhaps made that clearer, because I know that immediately I joined there, I went to the rest centre with Nicola. I was there a good few hours before returning back, because I know I was liaising directly with residents there, what we did in St Clement's was initially we set up a desk near the entrance so that we could make sure that we took information from everyone coming in. And later that day, there was a very kind woman who I don't even remember her name in the church who allowed us to have some office space at the back. So I used that as a sort of coordination centre to pull all our data together and organise my staff. So I spent the majority of the day there. Apart from when I popped back to give the information to the fire brigade, or I went to see if Graham was okay, or when Graham and I were liaising about important information and updating each other.
Right. And whenever you were at the command unit, was Robert Black there?
No, so he was only there till 9 o'clock, and then he went off to the gold group. So sorry, can you just repeat that again?
Yes, I'll try and make it more specific for you. So you arrive at 3:50, and Robert Black, we know, leaves at 9 a.m. or so. During that period of 5 or so hours, whenever you went back to the command unit during that period, was Robert Black always there?
Yes, yeah, he stayed there as the point of contact for the Lalo until he left and Graham took over.
Right. When you first arrived, as you say in your statement, and went to the command unit, did you see the Lalo there?
Yes.
Did you have a conversation with the Lalo?
I'm sure that I did. I can't remember the exact details of it, but we would have introduced ourselves and, yeah.
Okay. Was Robert Black with you when you were speaking to the Lalo?
I'm assuming he was. We were all just outside the command unit.
And then you, as I think, say, you went off and really set up the rest centres as you've explained. In a general.
Sorry, did you want to comment on that?
I'd just say I didn't have a role in setting up the rest centres. That would have been the RBKC's thing.
Right.
But in terms of, I coordinated the TMO staff's presence within them. I think almost before everything had kicked in officially, just to.
All right. So setting up, when I say setting up the rest centres, I mean allocating TMO staff
Yes,
to them and then
yes,
overseeing
yes.
their work.
Yes.
Right. During the night, as a general matter, how easy was it for you to be able to speak to Robert Black about anything you needed?
I don't think well, it would have been easy for me to walk there and have a conversation. I don't remember specifically talking to him much between when I went to St Clements for those first initial hours, because I was so focused on what I was doing there. So I don't remember having a lot of conversations. But when I've come back to see the fire brigade to pass on information, I would have seen him then.
Now, turning to a different topic, and Mr. Chairman, I've noticed that we've gone quite a long time with this witness.
Yes.
It's probably time for a break. I'm happy
That
to
would suit
continue.
you, would it?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Well, we were due to have a break round about this time anyway,
Okay.
Ms. Brown, and I think we'll take it now so that we can then go to whatever the next topic is without interruption.
Okay.
All right?
Okay.
So we'll break now. I'm going to ask you not to talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room,
Okay.
and we'll resume at 12 o'clock.
Thank you.
All right? Thank you very much. I'd like to go to the usher then, please.
Yeah.
She'll look after you. Right, 12 o'clock then, please. Thank you. Yes, could you ask Mrs. Brown to come back in, please? Thank you. Yes, do sit down. All right. Happy
Yeah.
to carry on?
Yes, please.
Yes, Mr. Willett.
Ms. Brown, thank you for coming back to us. I'm going to turn to a different topic now, which is the requests for information on the night. Now, can I ask you first to look, please, at paragraph 10 of your witness statement, which is on page 2. And you say there, and I'll read it all to you, you say there, RBKC emergency planning process was in operation. A Borough Emergency Command Centre, BEC, commenced operation at the RBKC offices. And then you say, Graham and I became the TMO liaison contact with the BEC. A local authority liaison officer, Leno, was located outside the command centre, where he was the link between the BEC and the command unit. He, along with the fire brigade and the police, made requests for information from the TMO. I've read all of that to you to give you the full context of what you're saying there. My question is, does this mean that the TMO was the main source of information on the night, even for the LALO?
Sorry, the main source of information for on the night? No, we can't have been, because we wouldn't. There was all sorts of information coming in from fire brigade, from ambulance, I would imagine, all sorts of things, people. Am I answering that correctly?
Right.
I'm not sure.
You say.
Well, I think the question was whether the LALO was the point at which, whether the TMO was the source of the information which would go to the LALO.
I guess it depends what the LALO was asking.
Well,
Am I misunderstanding that?
No. Well, let's get Mr. Millett.
Let's just focus then on the last sentence of that paragraph. You say he, and that's the LALO, along with the fire brigade and the police, made requests for information from the TMO.
Yeah.
And my question is, does that tell us that the TMO was the main source of whatever information the LALO asked for?
Yes, I think so.
Yes?
Well, it depends what the TMO was asking, but
Well, you've used the word information there without qualifying it and identifying what specific information you're referring to. And I'm just using your general word, information,
Okay.
there. And I'll just ask the question again, perhaps a slightly different way. Whenever the LALO asked for information, was the TMO the only source of that information? Or were there other sources of information that you knew that the LALO could get information from?
I'm sorry, I'm really
Wouldn't that depend
not
on the
really
informa-
understanding this.
No,
apart
I think you're entitled to be puzzled. It doesn't depend on what the information
Yeah.
that was being sought was. I mean, some types of information probably could only come from the TMO, or primarily from the TMO, and other types of information perhaps not.
Well,
I think what she's saying there is there were requests for information.
Yes. Ms. Brown, you say in your I'll try again. What you say, in the last sentence of this paragraph, you say, he, along with the fire brigade and the police, made requests for information from the TMO.
Okay.
Now, let me try it a different way. To your understanding, when the LALO made requests of information from the TMO, was it your understanding that that was the only place he could get the information from, or did you understand that whenever he asked you for information, that information was also available from elsewhere?
I think it depends what it was, because some would be specifically from us, others would, other information would be from other organisations or people on site.
All right. Well, I was trying to ask the question in a general way, but let's see if we can be a bit more specific. At paragraph 12, you say, I recall information being requested by LFB about numbers of floors, numbers of flats, details of occupants, and technical information such as presence of asbestos, etc. You see that?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Now, just focusing on that information requested by LFB, my question is, Was Robert Black also receiving those requests? Do you remember?
I don't specifically know what Robert Black was receiving directly because, as I've said previously, I wasn't always there. I don't know the answer to that question.
When you say you recall information being requested by LFB about those matters, how did those requests come to you? By what means of communication?
Okay, so perhaps I should qualify in this paragraph is that what I'm saying here is that I know that requests for that information was made. It wasn't specifically made to me individually, but just from discussions that I'd had with Graham and Robert, I knew that information had been requested from us. This is more about my knowledge. I know specifically that I was asked about the people who were missing, and I was asked the specific information about this, the 11th floor, from them directly. Mm-hmm. So I know my colleague answered some of these questions. Graham answered the asbestos question.
Right. Now, you say in the last answer that it wasn't specifically made to me individually, but just from discussions you'd had with Graham, then you corrected that to Robert. You knew information had been requested. Does that mean that when information was requested by LFB about these matters that you knew about, those requests had been made to Robert Black?
So the floor numbers, I think, was something that we were asked about really early on. I think there would have been Hash, myself and Robert there at that time. So that is one that I recall being asked. So this is numbers of floors, numbers of properties. I don't remember the occupancy details specifically. I wasn't there for the asbestos question, but I do know that Graham answered that. So that's how I can break down that paragraph.
And do you know who was asking those questions? Do you know who was asking the questions of, for example, Graham in relation to asbestos?
I don't know who asked Graham that specific question. Right. I'm sorry.
Now, in the last sentence of your paragraph 12, or the last part of that, you say, in the early stages, most of this information was relayed verbally. Do you remember to whom, in those early stages, that information was relayed?
So, I don't remember the name of the person. I do remember somebody asking us the floor numbers. I think that was probably with a fire brigade and the lay-low with us. I can't remember specifically, right. I'm afraid. I can't recall specifically the detail.
Now, I'm going to turn to a number of things that were requested. And you've given some categories of information: numbers of floors, numbers of flats, details of occupants, and technical information about the building. Turning to paragraph 14 to start with, if I can, you say, and we'll wait for it to come up on the screen, you say, I recall that the LFB was anxious to receive information about people who might be in the building. And you go on to explain that the TMO was able to provide details of the registered tenants, leaseholders and household members, but didn't hold information on unknown occupants and visitors. Now, can you recall when you were first aware of this request?
I can't remember when the general list of tenancy information was requested. I do know it was sent to the fire brigade, I do know we passed it on specifically to, I think it was it Thomas Goodall? I think I might not be 100% accurate about that, but I think that was right. That the general tenancy list was passed on to them. I think this is also referring to that information that we've spoken about earlier, which was actually more up to date on who was in the building at that specific time and who was missing and who was safe, and that's the information that I was passing onto the LFB.
So I think the answer to my question is you can't remember when. I was only asking a timing question.
Oh,
So-
sorry. When we passed it on, when we were asked for it?
When you were first asked.
No, I can't remember when the general list was asked for.
Right.
I know when it was provided.
Now, do you remember whom the London Fire Brigade asked for that information?
For the general list of tenants?
It's just
Or for
paragraph
any of the
14.
information?
In paragraph 14, you're referring to information about people who might be in the building. I'm just asking about that. Do you remember who it was that the LFB asked for information about people who might be in the building?
So I was having an ongoing conversation with them about providing them with these pieces of paper about the missing people,
Right.
and that would have been. I don't have a record of when I first passed that over. I know that I started working on it early hours in the morning, and I know that I physically went into the LFB van, I would say, about no, I can't be certain, but they took a record of everything that I had, and they will know exactly the timings of when I gave it.
Now, you say in your last answer, I was having an ongoing conversation with them about providing them with these pieces of paper about the missing people. Let's just be careful here. First of all, these pieces of paper about the missing people, is that the kind of record that we looked at earlier in the handwriting that wasn't yours about missing people in particular flats?
Initially it was,
Right.
but later on it was obviously much more efficient and much more organised about it.
Yeah.
This was when we didn't have a laptop on site, and we were doing what we could in real time to try and assist in any way we could. Later on in the day, we cross-referenced that information with the tenancy list, and we gave that to the LFB throughout the day at regular intervals. We updated it as we got information from the rest centre, so that was an ongoing process.
Yes.
And that will be recorded in the email trails.
Do you remember taking the first of those kinds of information about missing persons from the rest centres that we saw earlier this morning? Do you remember who you were giving that to?
Yes, I in my statement, I've put that there. So I'm sorry. Paragraph 18, Chris Lines, Vincent Bell,
Now,
and I physically handed it into the command unit on Grenfell Road,
right.
because I went to the main command unit with it, and they said no, that someone walked me round to the other
Yeah.
unit to hand it in.
Now that's, as you say in paragraph 18, mostly after 8 a.m., which is why I'm not asking you about them. Looking at the period, the early period of the fire, up to 8 a.m., my question is, do you remember who it was you were providing missing persons information to at the
But I think
NFB?
it was those people, and I think that the handwritten things were before 8 o'clock. I think the first, yeah, I think they were.
Now-
I mean, I can't be 100% certain about that. I'm hoping that the fire brigade would have records of that. They had my name on the board. They, they knew when I was delivering that information.
Yeah. Now, in relation to, just going back to paragraph 14, you refer in the second sentence to details of the registered tenants, leaseholders and household members. Who was responsible at the TMO on the night for gathering those details?
So that was information that would have been held on our systems. Recording of tenancy details, household details is on our system and on our CRM system. And on the night that list was extracted by David Noble, I believe, and sent to us.
Right, we'll come to some documents on that in just a moment. But in general terms, who had overall responsibility on the night, for gathering that information?
I don't know who was asked for it. I know that I utilised that information, so essentially I use that with the missing information and pass that on. So I don't know who was specifically asked to provide it. I know that I was utilising it and passing it on.
Right. You were utilising it, but do you know, maybe the answer is you don't, but do you know who had overall responsibility for obtaining that information that the fire brigade were asking for?
I guess, given that you've got a borough emergency plan and you've got a LAYLO who's the conduit, then the LAYLO would be the person who's making sure that that's delivered, I guess.
Yeah. Who within the TMO would be responsible on the night for responding to the LAYLO's request and obtaining that information?
So it would be the people who were there at the specific time. So that would have been Robert, Graham, or myself if I was there when something was asked.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you ever recall being specifically asked by anyone at the London Fire Brigade for the specific information about details of registered tenants?
No, I don't specifically.
Do you know who else was asked if it wasn't you?
No, I don't know. I do know who provided it, but I don't know who was asked.
Yes, and we'll come to that in a moment, absolutely. Now, at paragraph, still in 14 of your statement, going back to paragraph 14 of your statement, which I think we've just been on, you have said the TMO was able to provide details of the registered tenants, leaseholders and household members. And I just want to see where that information did originate from. Can I ask you please to be shown, first of all, TMO 100-31176. And this is an email within page 10 of that run of emails. So it's TMO 100-31176 at page 10. And at the top of that page, we've got it up there now, you can see, Ms. Brown, that it says, there's an email from David Noble, 14th of June 2017 at 5:24, sent to you, Robert Black, Angelique Noble, Louise Nejadonyi and Janice Ray. First of all, can you explain who Angelique Noble is?
So she's one of my team leaders in the neighbourhood team.
Right. And what about Louise Nejadonyi, if I've pronounced it correctly?
She is a rent income team leader.
Right. And what were their roles on the night?
So they were helping in the rest centres.
Right. And you can see that the subject is Grenfell occupants. The attachment's Grenfell Tower XLSX, which looks like a spreadsheet. And the text of the message is, all occupants of Grenfell as at 30th of May 2017, still trying to get live data to run, looking for plans. Did you ask David Noble for that information?
No, I didn't.
Do you know who did?
I'm afraid I don't. I know that David Noble was at home at this time, and he was just accessing systems and information.
Yes, and I think there's some emails that say that. Do you know, who is David Noble?
Sorry?
Who is David Noble?
He was I'm not going to get the title right, but he was essentially a policy officer with us and helped with our CRM data system.
Right, and CRM, could you just explain what is that?
Customer Relationship Management System.
Customer
CRM.
Relationship Manager or Management?
Management.
Okay.
CRM, yeah.
Okay. And did he have access to that data system at home?
Yes, I mean, I think what he was doing was just looking at general records. I don't know whether he was specifically asked for information.
Right. So I think you can't help us with what prompted David Noble to send this email.
I can't,
All right.
I'm afraid.
Do you remember whether you received this email before or after you were asked by the LFB, or before you know whether somebody else was asked by LFB for this kind of information?
I'm afraid I don't
Right.
know the answer to that. At this stage, I was in the rest centre at St Clement's.
Do you know what, when he refers to plans, do you know what plans he was looking for?
No,
Right. Do you know who had made the request for David Noble to look for plans?
I'm afraid I don't. As I say, I wasn't at command unit at this stage, so I wouldn't have been privy to live requests for information.
Now, this email, as we can see, Ms. Brown, also went to Robert Black. And I should just say, by this time, according to Nick Layton's evidence, 524, according to him, he had asked Robert Black to obtain a list of residents, and Robert Black, according to Mr. Layton, has said, or had said, that, and I paraphrase, he'd drawn a blank. Do you have any recollection of those matters?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
Do you remember whether Robert Black contacted you to ask you to obtain a list of residents?
No. You know, I literally at this time was focusing on what I could do to assist residents in St Clement's. So they would have known that I was fully occupied in that and wouldn't be. No, yeah.
All right. Did you respond to this email in any way?
No, I didn't. I utilised the attachment to help us with our spreadsheet, but I didn't respond to it. So I utilised it to help us provide that live information to the fire brigade.
I wonder if you could help us identify the attachment. Forgive me, Ms. Brown, if I get this wrong, but I wonder if we can just look at it. Can you please be shown RBK 000014629? Do you remember, and ignore the post-it note with the writing on it, but do you recall whether this was the attachment to David Noble's email?
I think this is only part of it.
Right. Do you remember what other part there was?
So there's a much more detailed spreadsheet that has the tenant's name, any mobility, disability features, the size of the bedroom sizes. Oh, yeah. I think there's.
Okay.
I think there's another detailed bit that has that.
All right. Well, we'll look at that in just a moment because there's another email I'm going to show you. But just looking at this at the moment, do you remember? Well, first of all, do you remember opening the attachment to the email we were just looking at?
I couldn't open the attachment on my phone, and I didn't have a laptop in the early stages. So my somebody, a head of service who worked for me, opened it up on my laptop when he arrived with the laptop I'd asked him to bring. So I didn't physically open it.
Right. When did that person arrive with the laptop?
I think about 8 o'clock.
I see. So does that mean that you didn't actually look at this data, this piece of paper, until that stage?
I didn't, because I was focused on providing the live data, but I know that this list was forwarded on around that time.
Right. And can you just identify the head of service who worked for you?
It's Kieran Singh. I have referred to him in the rest of my statement.
Yes. Okay. Now, let's then look on to the information that you then received shortly afterwards is another email, and this is TMO 100311176 at page 9, so back a page in the email run. And there are 2 emails on that page. I want to focus on the lower email, which is sent by David Noble at 14th of June, 5:38.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Do you remember receiving that email?
I know that I did receive it, yes.
Now, do you remember receiving that information in response to a request that you'd sent to David Noble?
Yeah. He'd sent me an Excel version and I couldn't open it. So
Yeah.
I tried to open. I asked him to send me a Word to see if I could open it. Yeah. That's right.
And if I could then turn back in this email clip to page 5, so TMO 100311176, page 5. This is at the bottom of the page, your email to David Noble at 0528, when you ask him, can you send as Word doc and to Nicholas? Is that the...
I meant Nicola Bartholomew.
Right, I was going to ask you about that. Are you sure you meant her and not Nicholas Layton?
I don't remember having a request from Nicholas Layton for any information at all. So I am making the assumption it's Nicola because Nicola was with me working on trying to identify the residents, working with me in the rest centre. So I wanted her to have access to the information.
Right. Now, reading it as Nicholas, that prompted my question, which was this information as a result of a request by the Lalo, Nicholas Layton?
I don't remember having any specific request for that information from the Lalo.
Right. Now go back then to page 10 of the same exhibit. I'm sorry, page 9 of the same exhibit. Bottom of the page, which we were looking at a moment ago, your email of 5:38.
Sorry.
So it's TMO 100311176, page 9. Which we were looking at a moment ago, which is where David Noble comes back to you and others, Robert Black and Nicola Bartholomew, Janice Ray and Angelique Noble, attaching Grenfell Tower shortlist doc and then the updated XLSX. And he says, this is the up-to-date data, use this one. Now, I'm just trying to identify what he sent you. Can I ask you to please to look at LFB quadruple 024371. Now, this is the first page of a long document, and we can see what it does, or says. And this is Grenfell Tower, address line 1, and then the tenancy type, tenancy start reason, number of beds, person ref, and then the full names, contact details, and mobile number. First of all, do you remember opening this document when David Noble sent it to you at this time and seeing these details?
No, I don't remember opening because I was just on my phone, and I know that we utilised it later, but I didn't open it on my phone.
I see.
It's too large a document to view in that way.
So even though it was a Word document, you still couldn't open it on your phone?
It's such a big document. You know, you couldn't see it with any clarity on your phone.
Could you see it at all? You even get an impression of the kind of information that David Noble was sending you at this time?
I mean, I knew what it was, and I knew how we were going to utilise it, and I know that it was sent on by Robert.
You knew that it was sent on by Robert?
Yeah. I've seen an email trail where Robert sends this data. I can't 100% say who it was to, but I know it was just before 8 o'clock.
Right. Now, just taking it in stages, Ms. Brown, if we can, you get this information at, as we've seen, at 5:38 from David Noble. You say you tried to open it. Did you see what? I think you said you could see what kind of information it was. You knew what it was.
Yeah.
Did you try and send it to anybody else at that stage?
No, I don't think I did. I was focused on trying to ascertain through all the teams in the West Centre the live data that was really important, because this is data on our system for who is our tenant at a moment in time, which I believe is as up to date as possible, but it wasn't giving us information about who was actually there on the night and who was safe and missing. And I was concentrating on that information from the rest centres because that was, in a sense, more helpful than relying on data that isn't really telling you if someone was in the building on the night. But I'm not saying it isn't important information. I'm just saying that is what I was concentrating on trying to do at this time.
So I think the answer to my question is no, you didn't try and send it to anybody else.
No, I didn't.
Did you ask David Noble to send it to anybody else?
No, I didn't.
So is there a reason why you didn't ask him to send it, for example, to Robert Black?
I think he did send it to Robert Black, but I didn't ask him to do that because I didn't know that anyone was asking for it.
Right. But you could see from the email that Robert Black had received it, but you couldn't open it. Did you make an assumption about, at that time, whether Robert Black could open it and read it?
I did assume that he would have sent it on, but yeah.
So you assumed he would send it on. Who did you assume he would send it on to?
Well, actually, to be fair, I didn't know who'd asked for it. I knew that he'd received it, so I think I made the assumption, if I'm really right, that if someone had needed it, that he would have been able to provide it because he had it, is the assumption I'm making.
Did it occur to you at the time to send it, or try to send it, to the Lalo, Nick Layton?
No, I didn't, for the reasons that I've given. No, yeah.
And just so I'm clear, could you just explain those reasons again?
Okay, because I was focusing on providing information that gave real-time information who was in the building that night against these addresses, who was safe and who was missing. So that would actually, detail if there were friends or visitors, or if people weren't there. So, we found on the night some people were abroad. So, that real-time data was in a way, more helpful.
Mm-hmm. Did it occur to you that the London Fire Brigade would find this information helpful?
Yes, of course so. I wish that we'd sent it, but in terms of its significance, if we were providing them the other more detailed, more live, this person's safe, this is missing, together with the information that they were already receiving directly from phone calls to them, I was concentrating on that. And I'm sorry if that was the wrong choice, but that is what I was doing at the time.
I understand that. Did you do anything to follow up to find out whether the LFB had received this information?
I know that I No, I didn't, because I was concentrating on other things. I know that they did receive it, and I know that what I organised with my teams is that we were comparing our live data with this, and sorry, what are the words? We tallied it. So we had this data, and then we had our live data with comments on about whether the person was in the property or safe and missing. And we had tabs that showed that, so that the LFB could have that complete information and understand what that position was. We also utilised that data to work with our colleagues in the council at RBKC to assist in, temporary rehousing those people. And that was all stuff that was, going on, live actions that I was involved in trying to make happen. And that's what I concentrated on.
Did you know whether any of the other recipients of this email, for example, Robert Black, were assuming that you were going to send this information to the LALO?
I don't know if he was making that assumption. I couldn't possibly tell.
Did you know at the time? That's what I'm asking.
No, I'm saying I couldn't possibly have known that.
Now, did you know at the time that Nicholas Layton had been pressing Robert Black for this kind of information?
No, I was in St Clement's Rest Centre for a considerable amount of hours, really trying to do the best I could. I didn't know what was happening.
All right. Okay. Just take a moment. Ms. Brown, we can take a break if you like.
No. I'll be fine.
You just take it.
need
That's all right. Just take a moment to settle yourself down.
I'm sorry, I don't know what Robert was asked for. I wasn't there.
After you had... I'm so sorry. I'll wait a few more minutes.
I'm fine.
All right.
Sorry.
After you had left the command unit after your initial arrival and went to work at the rest centres, do you remember having any communication at all with Nick Layton?
No.
Right.
No. No, I don't. He was the first LALO, wasn't he, Nick Layton?
Yes, he was. He left the site just to help you. He left the site at 7 o'clock in the morning, 7 a.m. And a chap called Mike Rumble then took over as LALO at that stage.
I don't recall any specific conversations with him, I'm afraid. I will have had them at some point, but...
Now, moving ahead on this topic in the chronology, we know that you were copied into an email, I think you've touched on it in your evidence, where this information was sent to the LFB. It's TMO 100311176 at page 4. I can ask you please to be shown that. And
yeah.
this is the email which starts a third of the way down the page from Robert Black, 14th of June 2017 at 07:56 to londonfire.gov.uk, and it's copied to you. You see that?
Yeah.
And forward, Grenfell residence,
Yeah.
Grenfell Tower shortlist, Grenfell Tower updated. And then he says, hi from Teresa and getting a hard copy. And then underneath it, we can see what is forwarded. And it is the David Noble email to Robert Black and you at, bearing the time mark of 05:38 we looked at earlier. And just to help you, it says, this is the up-to-date data, use this one.
Yeah.
Now, do you remember receiving, I think you do remember receiving the email from Robert Black and him emailing it on to Thomas Goodall?
I can see that that's there, yeah.
Yeah. Can you help me? When Robert Black says to the fire brigade, hi from Teresa and getting a hard copy, What does he? Can you explain from Teresa?
No, I can't explain that. I don't understand why it's from me, because it's actually from David, and I've not inputted anything different to that, so I don't really understand that comment, I'm afraid, now.
Can you help us with why it took from what appears to be 05:38 a.m. until what appears to be 07:56 a.m. for David Noble's message and attachments to be sent to the fire brigade?
I'm afraid I can't answer that any more than you asked me before. I don't know the answer to that.
When you saw the email from Robert Black to the fire brigade into which you were copied, did it occur to you at that point that the fire brigade had asked for this information?
No, because, as I say, it's still at this point, I'm dealing with trying to get the live data. I wouldn't have concentrated on that email. I may not have even seen it until later. I can't tell you 100% when I saw that. I just know it was sent.
Right. Now, let's turn to Mike Rumble, the Lalo. Do you remember being introduced to him?
At some point, yes. I can't tell you what time, but I do remember having some conversation with him at some point.
Now, he says in his witness statement that after a meeting which started at 8:20, he asked you for a list of all the occupants of Grenfell Tower. Do you remember that?
I don't specifically. Sorry, at what time? Because I haven't got his witness statement.
So let me try and be a bit more specific with that. Let's take a wider time frame. Before 9 a.m., do you remember Mike Rumble, the then Lalo, asking you for a list of all occupants of Grenfell Tower?
I'm afraid I don't specifically.
Do you remember telling Mike Rumble that, or having a conversation with him about the fact that at just before 8 o'clock, Robert Black had sent a list of residents to the LFB? I
don't remember that.
You don't remember?
I was only fleetingly near Mike Rumble and at the command unit around this time.
Right.
I'd gone back to take Graham when Graham arrived, and I think probably that was the first time I'd gone back since I'd left, other than to provide LFB with information. Okay.
Now, Mr. Rumble also says in his statement, and for the record, this is paragraph 13.2. He says before 11 o'clock in the morning, at some point before 11 o'clock in the morning, he says that he was handed a list of all the tenants of Grenfell Tower by you, Teresa Brown.
Yeah. So I think what did happen is that my PA came to site with a printed version of that list that had been sent before. Someone had asked her, I don't remember if it was me, it may have been me, but somebody had asked her to bring that to site. I think there's some reference to Robert saying hard copy coming, yes. And it did come. She brought it to site, and she would have given it to me, and I would have handed it over.
Right.
I suspect. I'm absolutely not 100% sure on that, but that's my recollection, I think.
The request for hard copy is actually a statement. Getting a hard copy is contained in the email we can see on the screen still. Yeah. His email at 7:56 to the LFB. So does that mean that it took up to a further 3 hours to get hold of a hard copy of the list of residents?
I don't know specifically. I can't remember whether, like I said, whether I was asking for that information or whether Robert asked for that information.
Now, he says that you brought to him a hard copy A3 size computer printout. Does that accord with your recollection?
I can't absolutely remember that, but I have a vague recollection that that is the case.
Right.
And yeah.
Before the time when your PA brought you what you've described as the printed version, was there a time when you could view this that information, the full list of residents and the details about them, on a laptop?
Sorry, this is by 11. So yes, definitely. By this time, Kieran was on site, because he was on site quite early. He would have been comparing he would have had that list and be utilising that information to collate the missing, to overlay the missing information as we've discussed before. So would I have looked at it in detail? I was relying on him compiling all the information together while I was doing other things.
So, seeing if I can break that down a bit, and I'm sorry to grind into some detail, but Kieran is this right, the person who brought the laptop to site?
Yes.
Right. When was that?
I think it was about 8 o'clock.
And at that stage, did you use the laptop, open it up, and look at the information that David Noble had sent to you earlier in the night?
No. Kieran utilised the information to start our spreadsheet. So that was the basis that we started on. We had the tenancy information, property, bedroom size, and then we added the columns with the live data.
I understand. At the stage at which you first could see the list of residents on Kieran's laptop, was that long after 8 a.m. or at about 8 a.m.?
I'm afraid I don't remember specifically. And I was doing a number of other things, and I'm not sure how much time I would have spent looking at the laptop and that data on it. I was trusting a really competent officer to put that information together,
right.
So I'm not sure how long I would have spent doing that.
Did you know at that time that this was still information was information that the Lelo was after?
No, because I would have been in
Right.
St Clements, probably still. I was definitely in St Clements with Kieran.
Did you have a discussion with Mike Rumble about this information after you'd seen the information on Kieran's laptop, but before you received the hard copy at about 11 o'clock?
I honestly can't remember that, I'm afraid. I don't recall that.
Right. Now, turning to, if I can, the details about the building, can I ask you please to get back to paragraph 12 of your statement? And I'll just ask you to refresh your memory of what that says. That's page 2 of your witness statement. So we're in TMO 100-48960. And you say there that you requested, or the LFB requested, information about the building, technical information such as the presence of asbestos, etc., is what you say. Turning to that kind of information, again, do you recall who requested that?
No, I don't. And as I explained before, this is the collective information that myself and colleagues were asked for. Right. I don't remember being specifically asked about the asbestos information, but I absolutely know that Webb provided that information. So Graham and I were, updating each other with information.
And he told us a little bit about that earlier this morning in his evidence. Do you remember there being a particular concern on the night about asbestos?
I'm afraid I don't.
Do you remember what technical information about the building, other than the presence of asbestos, you were asked for?
Technical information. I'm sorry I don't, but it may well not, or it's most likely that it wasn't me who was asked, but I can't recall. Right.
Can I ask you please then to go back to an email we looked at shortly, a little bit before, TMO 100311176 at page 10. This is the email at 5:24 from David Noble to you and Robert Black and others. This is the first list of Grenfell Tower residents or occupants. And at the end of that sentence, we looked at it before, it says, looking for plans. Do you remember how the question of plans first came up?
No, I don't. I do know that they were sent. And I do know that there were a number of familiarisation visits with the LFB in advance of the fire, and that was after the refurbishment had occurred. And my assumption was that in those familiarisation visits that plans would have been given to them.
Was there a premises information box at Grenfell Tower on the night of the fire?
Not that I know of.
Right. But you say your assumption is that on the 72D visits, the plans of this building would have been put in the hands of the LFB?
Yeah, because I know that several familiarisation visits were done, and the refurbishment would have occurred, or as the refurbishment was occurring. So my assumption would be that they'd be looking at those plans as the fire brigade are familiarising themselves with a building that's changed in layout.
There's a limit to how far I can follow that up, but I just want to ask this question. Who within would anybody within the TMO have been responsible for providing those plans to the fire brigade during those 72D visits?
So I think I'm right in saying that our health and safety officer would have done those site visits with the LFB, or it may have been our assets team as the work were going on. So I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it was the health and safety responsibility.
Okay.
That's not an area that comes under my control, so I can't give you that with absolute.
On the night, did you have any assumption that the London Fire Brigade would already have plans in their possession for this building?
Absolutely.
When you saw this email from David Noble, which said looking for plans, did it occur to you at that point that the London Fire Brigade might not have?
Well, I didn't know whether he was looking for plans because someone was specifically asked for him,
right,
or whether he's just doing a general search of all of our stuff to find something useful. That's the kind of type of person he would have been, trying to just look for things in case we needed it. I don't know whether he'd been asked that, but definitely my assumption is that they would have had those plans in advance.
Right.
Just because that's a regular thing that happens.
Yeah, and I take it from many of the answers that you've given me this morning that you wouldn't have followed up or didn't follow up with David Noble this question of the search for plans of this building. Is that right?
Yeah.
Do you know who did?
I know from looking at evidence this week that that's been covered to a certain extent. I remember Robert's evidence to that regard. But
we don't.
That's as far as I know specifically. I don't know anything more myself.
Independent of the evidence in this inquiry, I think the answer is no. Right. Now, can I then ask you to look at a different email? And Mr. Chairman, it's within a topic that I'm not going to finish before 1 o'clock, and is probably better picked up after 1 o'clock. after
Yes.
the break.
Are you able to give me any indication of how much longer you
Yes,
may need with the witness?
probably another 45 minutes or so.
Oh, right. Well, I'm sorry. I was hoping that we could finish your evidence before we stop for lunch, but I
Okay.
think that isn't now going to be possible.
Okay.
And I think it's more sensible anyway, give you a break.
Okay.
So is that a good point to take a break?
Yes,
Yes,
Mr.
right.
Mr.
So
Chairman, it is.
we'll stop now. We'll have time for lunch, and we'll resume at 2:00.
Okay.
And then we'll, I hope, get you away as soon as we can. Anyway, so please don't talk to anyone about your evidence over the break. And if you'd like to go with the usher, she'll look after you.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right? Thank you very much. Good. Thank you very much. 2:00 then, please. Thank you.